I was standing in the hallway of St. Michael's Hospital, holding a manila envelope that could change everything, when my phone buzzed with a bank notification. $300,000. Transferred out. The cancer fund. My son's cancer fund. Gone. And the account it went to belong to my wife. I read the notification twice. Then a third time. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I just slid the phone back into my coat pocket and looked down at the envelope in my other hand. The lab results. The ones she didn't know existed. The ones that would unravel every lie she had ever told me. I stood there for a long time, alone in that cold hallway, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to say a word. Not yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense unless you understand who I was before it all fell apart. My name is Robert. Most people call me Rob. I'm 61 years old. I spent 34 years working as a structural engineer for a firm outside of Pittsburgh. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. I built things. Bridges, mostly. I liked the idea that something I designed would still be standing long after I was gone. That gave me a sense of purpose. I was never a man who needed attention. I didn't need praise. I just needed to know that what I did mattered. I married my first wife, Catherine, when I was 24. She was a schoolteacher, gentle, patient, the kind of woman who could calm a room just by walking into it. We had one son together. His name is Daniel. Danny. He was the center of our world. When Catherine passed away from a stroke at 47, I thought the ground beneath me had opened up and swallowed everything good. Danny was only 19 at the time. He held my hand at the funeral and told me, "We're going to be okay, Dad." And somehow, because he said it, I believed him. For a few years, it was just the two of us. Danny went to college, studied biology, and came back home to work at a research lab nearby. He was quiet like me, thoughtful. We'd sit on the porch on Sunday evenings, drinking coffee, not saying much. We didn't need to. That silence between us was full of love. It was the most complete feeling I've ever known. Then I met Vivian. She came into my life at a church fundraiser. She was 53, well-dressed, articulate, and warm. She laughed at my awkward jokes. She asked about Danny. She seemed genuinely interested in who I was, not what I had. At least, that's what I believed at the time. After about a year of seeing each other, we got married. A small ceremony. Danny stood as my best man. He told me he was happy for me. But I remember his eyes that day. There was something cautious in them. Something I chose to ignore. Vivian moved into the house I had shared with Catherine. She redecorated. She rearranged the kitchen. She replaced the curtains. Small things at first. But slowly, the house stopped feeling like mine. It started feeling like hers. I told myself that was normal. That's what marriage is. You make room. For the first 2 years, things were fine. Vivian was affectionate. She cooked dinner most nights. She came to family gatherings. She even helped Danny pick out a birthday gift for me once. I thought I had found a second chance. I really did. Then Danny got sick. It started with fatigue. Then weight loss. Then a cough that wouldn't go away. The doctors ran tests. Then more tests. Then they sat us down in a small beige room and told us what no father should ever have to hear. Stage 3 lymphoma. Aggressive. Treatable. But the road would be long and expensive. Danny looked at me across that room, and for the first time since he was a little boy, I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For me. He didn't want to be a burden. That's the kind of man he was. And I grabbed his hand and said the same thing he once told me. We're going to be okay. I set up a dedicated savings account the very next day. I called it the Cancer Fund. Over the following months, I poured everything I had into it. I cashed in a portion of my retirement. I sold a piece of land, Catherine, and I had bought decades ago. I took on freelance consulting work. Even at my age, every dollar went into that account. $300,000. Every cent earmarked for Danny's treatment. Chemotherapy, specialist consultations, experimental therapies, if it came to that. I would have sold my own bones if it meant keeping my son alive. Vivian knew about the fund. She knew every detail. I trusted her completely. She was my wife. I even added her name to the account because she insisted it was safer that way. What if something happens to you, Rob? She said. Someone needs to be able to access it for Danny. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like love. I didn't think twice. But things began to shift in ways I didn't expect. Vivian started making comments. Small ones, at first. Danny's treatment is costing a fortune. Are we sure the specialist is necessary? Maybe we should consider a less expensive option. I brushed it off. Medical bills are stressful. I understood that. But then the comments became sharper. She started questioning whether Danny was really as sick as they say. She said it casually one evening over dinner, like she was discussing the weather. I put my fork down and stared at her. She smiled and said, "I'm just being practical, Rob." Practical. That word haunted me. Then came the night that cracked something inside me. Danny had come over for dinner. He was thin. His skin had that grayish tint that chemotherapy leaves behind. He was trying to eat, really trying, but his hands were trembling. And Vivian looked at him from across the table and said, "You know, Daniel, a lot of people go through worse. You should try to be more positive." Danny didn't respond. He just looked down at his plate. But I saw his jaw tighten, and I saw the tear he blinked away before anyone else could notice. That night, after Danny left, I told Vivian that what she said was cruel. She told me I was overreacting. She told me I was too emotional. She said I was letting Danny's illness turn me into someone she didn't recognize. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, and for the first time, I felt truly alone in my own marriage. Over the next few weeks, Vivian became more distant. She started going out more. Lunches with friends. Shopping trips. A weekend visit to her sister in Virginia that I later found out never happened. I didn't investigate. I didn't snoop. That wasn't who I was. But the signs were there, lined up like dominoes, waiting for someone to push the first one. Then came the day I got the bank notification. $300,000. Transferred. Gone. I called the bank. They confirmed it. Vivian had moved the entire cancer fund into a personal account under her name. Every dollar, every cent I had scraped together for my son's survival. She had taken it without telling me, without asking, without a single word. I sat in my truck in the hospital parking lot, and I cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears rolling down my face in the darkness. I wasn't crying because of the money. I was crying because I had trusted someone with my son's life, and she had stolen it like it was nothing. But here's what Vivian didn't know. She didn't know about the envelope. A few weeks earlier, Danny's oncologist had called me privately. He told me that Danny's latest round of tests had come back with unexpected results. Not about the cancer, about something else. Something that raised questions about Danny's biological background. The doctor was cautious, diplomatic, but I understood what he was saying. The markers in Danny's blood work had revealed certain genetic information that didn't align with what was on file. The doctor recommended a more thorough genetic panel, and I agreed. The results were in that envelope I was holding in the hospital hallway. But let me back up even further, because this is where the story turns. When Vivian married me, she brought with her a son from a previous relationship. His name was Craig. Craig was in his early 30s, lived 2 states away, and rarely came around. Vivian talked about him occasionally, usually to complain that he never called. I had met him only twice. He was polite but distant. I didn't think much of him. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Vivian and Craig had been in financial trouble for years. Craig had gambling debts. Serious ones. The kind that come with threats and deadlines. Vivian had been quietly funneling money to him for a long time, long before she married me. And when she saw my cancer fund sitting in that account, $300,000 with her name on it, she saw a way out. Not for Danny, for Craig, for herself. She didn't take that money for groceries. She didn't take it for a rainy day. She took it to cover her son's gambling debts and to secure a condo she had quietly put a deposit on. A condo in Virginia. A fresh start. A life without me. A life without Danny. I found all of this out, but not right away. It came in pieces. A receipt left in a coat pocket. A phone call she took in the garage. A credit card statement that arrived at the house by accident. I collected each piece like a man building a case, which as it turns out, is exactly what I was doing. I hired a lawyer. Quietly, a woman named Margaret Hollis, recommended to me by an old colleague. Margaret was in her 60s, sharp as a blade, and had spent her career handling exactly this kind of betrayal. Financial fraud within a marriage. I gave her everything. The bank records, the receipts, the phone records. She looked at it all and said, "Rob, your wife committed a crime, and we're going to prove it." But I told Margaret to wait. Not yet. I wasn't ready, because there was still the envelope. The genetic panel results. I opened them alone, sitting in my truck under the pale light of a parking garage. And what I read changed everything. The results confirmed that Danny was my biological son. There was never any question about that. But the panel also flagged something else. A familial match had appeared in a medical database. Danny shared partial genetic markers with another individual, someone who had also been tested recently at a different hospital. That individual was Craig. Danny and Craig were half-brothers. I sat with that information for 3 full days before I understood what it meant. Vivian had known my first wife, Catherine. They had crossed paths years before I ever met Vivian. And Vivian's ex-husband, Craig's father, had also known Catherine. The timeline, when I laid it out on paper, pointed to one conclusion. Vivian's ex-husband had had an affair with Catherine years before I married her. Danny was still mine biologically, conceived after that affair ended. But the genetic overlap between Danny and Craig came from a shared paternal line on Vivian's side. Vivian's ex-husband was connected to my first wife in a way that no one had ever disclosed. And Vivian knew. She had always known. That's why she targeted me. That's why she came to that church fundraiser. That's why she asked about Danny. She wasn't interested in love. She was interested in proximity, in access, in money. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was architectural. She had built a life around a lie, and I had been living inside it like a fool. But I was done being a fool. I called Margaret and told her it was time. The first thing we did was freeze the account Vivian had transferred the money into. Margaret filed an emergency petition with the court, presenting evidence of unauthorized financial transfer and potential elder financial abuse. The judge granted a temporary restraining order within 48 hours. Vivian couldn't touch a dime. The second thing we did was file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. What Vivian had done wasn't just a marital dispute. It was theft. She had taken funds earmarked for a cancer patient's medical treatment. That carries weight in a courtroom. Margaret made sure of it. The third thing we did was contact Danny's medical team and establish a secondary treatment fund, protected under a legal trust that only I and Danny's oncologist could access. Danny's treatment would not be interrupted, not for one single day. Vivian found out about the freeze on a Tuesday morning. I know, because she called me 17 times in a row. I didn't answer. She drove to the house. I had changed the locks the night before. She stood on the porch, banging on the door, screaming my name. I sat in the kitchen, drinking my coffee, and I waited. When she finally stopped, I opened the door and handed her a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the court order. She read it, and I watched the blood drain from her face. "You can't do this," she said. "I already did," I replied. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe she was, because the man she had married, the quiet, trusting, gentle man who never raised his voice, that man had been paying attention all along. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Vivian hired a lawyer, but her case was weak. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, transfer logs, the condo deposit in Virginia, Craig's gambling debts, documented in court filings from another state, the phone records showing coordinated planning between Vivian and Craig. Margaret laid it all out like a blueprint. Clean, precise, undeniable. The judge ruled in my favor. The full $300,000 was ordered returned to Danny's treatment fund. Vivian was charged with financial exploitation and theft by deception. She pleaded no contest. She received 2 years of probation, a permanent restraining order, and a financial restitution mandate. Our marriage was annulled, not divorced. Annulled, as if it never existed. And in many ways, it never really did. Craig disappeared after the ruling. I heard through Margaret that he left the state. I don't know where he went. I don't care. He was never my concern. But here's the part of the story that people don't expect. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying something too heavy in silence. I sat with Danny the evening after the final ruling. We were on the porch, in the same chairs we'd always used. He was wrapped in a blanket because the chemo made him cold, even in summer. He looked at me and said, "Dad, how did you know?" I told him the truth. I said, "I didn't know. I just paid attention." He nodded slowly. Then he said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, "You didn't just save the money, Dad. You saved me from thinking no one cared." I had to look away when he said that, because if I had looked at him, I would have broken down completely. And I needed to be strong for him. I had always needed to be strong for him. Danny's treatment continued. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The lymphoma responded to the second round of chemo better than expected. He still had a long road ahead, but for the first time in over a year, there was hope in his eyes. Real hope, not the kind you perform for other people. The kind that lives quietly inside you and refuses to die. I think about Vivian sometimes. Not with anger, not with hatred. I think about her with a kind of sad clarity. She was a woman who never learned the difference between taking and receiving. She saw love as a transaction. She saw trust as an opportunity. And in the end, she lost everything. Not because I destroyed her, but because her own choices caught up with her. There's a lesson in that, I think. People often ask me how I stayed so calm through all of it. How I didn't explode. How I didn't scream or throw things or fall apart. And the truth is, I wanted to. There were nights when the anger was so hot inside me that I could feel behind my eyes. But I had learned something a long time ago, back when Catherine died, and I had to hold myself together for a 19-year-old boy who needed his father. I learned that strength is not about force. It's about stillness. It's about choosing what you do with your pain instead of letting your pain choose for you. Quiet people are often underestimated. People assume that if you don't raise your voice, you don't have one. They assume that if you don't fight back immediately, you never will. But some of us are just waiting, watching, collecting the truth one piece at a time. And when we finally move, we don't move with rage. We move with certainty. I'm not telling this story to get sympathy. I'm telling it because I know there are people out there right now, people my age, maybe older, who are being taken advantage of by someone they trust. A spouse, a child, a caregiver, someone who smiles at them while reaching into their pocket. And I want those people to know something. You are not powerless. You are not stupid. You are not weak. You are just kind. And kindness is not a flaw, but it must be protected. You must draw a line, even a quiet one, and you must offend it. Danny and I still sit on that porch on Sunday evenings. The coffee is the same. The silence is the same. But something has changed. There's a weight that's been lifted. Not all of it. Some scars don't disappear, but enough that we can breathe again. He looked at me last Sunday and said, "Dad, do you ever regret marrying her?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "I regret trusting someone who didn't earn it. But I don't regret being the kind of man who trusts, because that's who your mother loved, and that's who you needed me to be." He smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, it reached his eyes. If you're watching this and you've been hurt by someone you loved, I want you to hear me. Your pain is real. Your anger is justified. But don't let it eat you alive. Use it, quietly, carefully, with purpose, because the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. The best revenge is simply standing up, dusting yourself off, and living the rest of your life with dignity. That's what I did, and I would do it again.